Hello, and welcome to Quarantine Cocktails with Chad and Nicole. But really, Chad,
No.
and I'm just the awkward hands of the operation.
Not at all.
Today we are discussing the margarita. The core ingredients of the margarita are typically tequila, lime, and triple sec, often with some sugar added, and it's generally served with a salt rim on the rocks or with crushed ice, sometimes served up. Given its association with warmer climates and tropical islands and that sort of thing, and the profusion of sweet fruity blended versions, one might suppose that the margarita is closely related to the daiquiri. However, it may be more closely related to the sidecar, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So over the years, the margarita has picked up quite a number of possible origin stories. Like most of these cocktails, there are many versions that we read about. Most of the ones we hear about the margarita date from the 1930s or the 1940s and involve a woman variously named Marjorie, Margaret, Rita, or Margarita. But it seems to us that the most plausible story with the least amount of sort of unknown bits to it is that the margarita evolved from an earlier cocktail from the 1800s named the Daisy, interestingly enough. The Daisy remained popular throughout Prohibition, and interestingly enough, the word margarita is Spanish for daisy, like the flower. So, do you want to go into
Once more, this takes us back to our dear friend Jerry Thomas, the towering figure of 19th century mixology. In the 1876 second edition of his Bartender's Guide, it contains a recipe for the Daisy, a cocktail with a base of brandy, including lemon juice, curacao, gum syrup, and 2 dashes of rum, served over shaved ice with a bit of seltzer water. The Daisy actually has many variations coming from somewhere in the 1800s, and it's basically considered to be almost a family of cocktails with a certain amount of a base spirit, a citrus juice, usually lemon, but sometimes orange or lime, and then a sweetener in the form of a liqueur. And so that's sort of the base components of a Daisy. Now, there are various versions that claim that, say, the seltzer or soda water is an essential part, but that might be more of a modern interpretation, given that so many modern day cocktails actually share the characteristics of the base Daisy kind of family. That includes the sidecar, as we mentioned, which is brandy, lemon, and triple sec as a sweetener. The Cosmopolitan could also be considered a descendant of the Daisy with vodka as the base spirit, but then lime juice and cranberry juice sort of providing some of the juice space, and the sweetener coming from, again, triple sec. We see that the margarita, with its 3 main components, also is a kind of a translation of that base Daisy recipe into a Mexican setting. Now, whether it was invented in Mexico or invented by an American living near Mexico, visiting Mexico, it's pretty unclear. But we do know that tequila Daisy was mentioned without reference to its complete ingredient set or inventor in the Syracuse Herald as early as 1936.
So it's interesting to note that the Daisy recipe Chad just mentioned includes shaved ice. The margarita, unlike, say, the sidecar or the Cosmopolitan, is most often served on the rocks, over crushed ice, or blended. But Albert Hernandez Sr. is credited with the invention of the blended margarita at La Plaza restaurant in La Jolla, California in 1948. While the margarita machine was invented by Mariano Martinez in Dallas, Texas in 1971. The margarita was further popularized in 1977 by Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. And in 2004, it was described as the most popular mixed drink in America.
Yeah, and so, regardless of the full date and birthplace of the margarita, it's pretty clear that its core ingredients have remained stable since the 1930s. And its enduring popularity has to do with its blend of the saltiness that from the rim, the tartness of the lemon, the sweetness from the sweetener, and then that earthy quality of the tequila and the bite that comes from the tequila. So tequila, which is sort of the characteristic ingredient, is a distilled spirit made from the blue agave plant grown in parts of Mexico, and it dates back to the 1600s. There have traditionally been three main categories of tequila: Blanco, Reposado, and Añejo, although in 2006 they introduced a fourth category called Extra Añejo. And Blanco is basically the unaged form of the tequila spirit, and it's generally bottled in steel, kept in steel tanks and then bottled, and it's never aged for more than 2 months. Reposado is aged at least 2 months, but no more than 1 year in oak barrels. And then Añejo and Extra Añejo are aged for at least 1 year and at least 3 years, respectively. So the Blanco is sort of harsher, more spirit forward. As with most spirits, the aging process tends to smooth it out and kind of take the flavor profile and make it a little bit more subtle in its attack. The margarita is generally made with Blanco tequila, although it is possible to use an aged tequila, and we'll do that today in our demoed cocktail. Turning to the other ingredients, we've got limes, and I know you guys are excited to hear all about limes.
I'm pumped.
So the kind of lime that's standard in the United States today is known as the Persian lime, and the majority of limes from Mexico are actually a variety of key lime. So the Persian limes tend to have a thicker skin and fewer seeds. And the Mexican limes will tend to be more astringent and bitter. Now, this might be contrary to our perception of what, say, the flavor profile of key lime from key lime pie, where it tends to go in a sweeter and less tart direction. This actually owes to the fact that key limes, which were grown in the Florida Keys, actually took on a very distinct characteristic, quite different from those from the same limes grown in Mexico. They become more because of the sort of unique terroir of the Florida Keys, the amount of moisture, those limes would grow much larger and tend to become sweeter. So when we talk about key lime pie, you might want to be careful not to make it from Mexican key limes, but try to actually find some of the sweeter key limes actually grown in the Florida Keys. Or just settle for making them from the standard Persian lime that you find. I'll also note that the use of the Mexican key lime might actually be a reason for the addition of additional sweeteners above and beyond the triple sec that you sometimes find when people add in sugar, agave syrup, or some simple syrup direct into their margaritas. Yeah.
So another ingredient is triple sec. We've discussed it before. It is a French invention based on Curacao. We know Grand Marnier is a common triple sec as well. We know that they can also be used in margaritas, and those are often called the Cadillac margarita. So the first appearance of salt on the rim of the glass is unknown, but it's another innovation that is designed to cut the bitterness of the drink and bring the sweet flavors forward, as we know salt can do. Modern bartenders often incorporate small amounts of diluted saline to enhance the citrus-based drinks as well.
Yeah. So I've read about someone who keeps that as a dropper and simply drops 4 drops of saline into any citrus drink because they feel it actually brings out the sweetness of the drink. All right, so that's a little bit about the history of the margarita and notes on its ingredients. We'll turn to the cocktail that we're going to demo today. It's basically a version of a cocktail that was invented by Fatima Leon, who was named bartender of the year in Mexico in 2018. So recently, not 1918. And this cocktail was called the Extraordinary Margarita. It calls for adding Aperol into the margarita. As you know, Aperol is Campari's less bitter cousin, which we touched on last week when we talked about the Negroni. So Leone recipe calls for the use of Don Julio Añejo 70, which is an añejo, but here we choose to substitute in Don Julio Reposado, which is a little bit more accessible and easily available. Although it is a little pricier than most of the liquors that we've presented here. The price of tequila has been rising due to shortages in blue agave. It's also interesting to note that in Mexico, most of the tequilas come in at about 70 proof, whereas those sort of produced for export to the U.S. are at 80 proof, and so creates some minor variations in the experience for the cocktail. Besides that substitution, our other innovation is to actually incorporate the Aperol ice cubes that we presented in the very first week of our quarantine cocktail series. Those Aperol ice cubes are 50-50 Aperol and water. They freeze nicely. And for me, it's kind of a little nod by incorporating this cocktail to the full scope of ice and its presence in the margarita, and through being on the rocks, the blended, shaved and blended versions of the margarita get a little nod from this. Over time, the drink changes a little bit because of the presence of those cubes. So first, for those following along at home, making a classic margarita, here is our recipe for the classic margarita. You can see that there are a lot of variations actually on the amount, whether you use 2 ounces of tequila or 1.5, whether you use a little bit more triple sec than you use of the lime juice, varies, but this is sort of one of the standard ones. And also optionally include a little bit of simple syrup if you tend to like your drinks a little bit sweeter. One of the things I do recommend is using that salt rim, and you can either serve it, and serve it over the rocks for this version, or over chipped ice if you want, crushed ice. And garnishing with a lime wheel is somewhat traditional, although optional. It doesn't necessarily add a lot to the drink itself. But the recipe that we'll be demoing is this one, the Extra Extraordinary Margarita, because why not? And you'll see that we've got the Reposado, 1/2 ounce each of the Cointreau and the fresh lime, and then we actually incorporate 3/4 ounce of Aperol. So the Aperol is a pretty significant presence here. The thing that I like about this is actually it provides both some sweetness and some bitterness. With the salt, you take in the salt, you get some of the sweetness, you get some of the tartness, and you get some of the bitterness. So you actually hit all 4 of those major flavors. And I don't know, does tequila count as umami? We could get all 5 in there if we wanted to, or maybe I'll have to work on that. We'll throw some bacon in or something. I don't know. So, but this is the Extra Extraordinary margarita that we'll be making. So, proceeding to our demo, we'll first get our
Salt.
cocktails here. Well, we'll do the salt as soon as before I put anything in the glass, but let's get our liquors sorted first. So here is the Don Julio. All right. So we will put in, since I'm making 2 for 1, I will put in 3 ounces of that. Nicole will cut and freshly squeeze our limes over there.
How much do you need?
Need an ounce total of that. Next up, we'll put in our Cointreau. And I really do recommend using Cointreau or Combier for triple secs, or if you want a little extra richness, the Grand Marnier is great with its brandy base. You know, all of those are somewhat higher proof than the sort of more kind of run-of-the-mill triple secs. So I really recommend this as a place to put a little bit of your money in overall as an investment in having a higher quality cocktail.
This is an ounce?
That is a half ounce, my dear.
What is that?
This is 2 ounces.
So 2 of those.
Yes, 2 of these small ones. All right, next up is our Aperol. Lovely orange color. Not quite as red as its cousin, the Campari, but it will give this a lovely orange rose tint. Overall, we'll take our lime juice. Now with the lime juice, I like to go a little fat on the lime juice because there will be some loss due to pulp and such. So I'm putting in my full ounce for my 2, and then I'm going to put in just a touch more. I like the way that comes out overall. All right, so then we've got our liquors combined in our cocktail shaker along with our citrus. And we will prepare our glasses. Great. We'll get those out in just a sec. So I'm going to take my glass, and in order to rim it, I'm going to do a half rim so that we don't overpower the whole thing with salt. I'll use lime on the outer edge of that glass, and I will just roll the outer edge of these glasses to get a nice half rim of salt on there. And I'm using these gin sour glasses. I like the shape, and it's obviously it can hold a little bit more than the Nick and Nora glasses that we've been using quite a bit lately. You could use a usual rocks glass as well for this, but I just kind of like the way this looks. And some people complain about putting any kind of ice cube in one of these in an up glass, but because of the shape of the sour glass, I think it works out all right, especially because we're not using the hugest kind of ice cubes. So we've rimmed our glasses now, and then we can go ahead and you can get ice out to fill this. Mm-hmm. So we'll throw some ice into our shaker, and that's to fill it at least like 3/4 full. Now we're going to shake as a reminder because we have citrus involved here, and so we want to get that well mixed, and we want to get it aerated. And in addition to that, we're going to be chilling and diluting. As we've discussed before, when you're using your ice out of your home freezer that hasn't been sitting out, we actually tend to have to shake a little bit longer in order to get the right level of dilution. And so I'm going to shake this for a good 30 seconds. And Nicole will show you the Aperol ice cubes. Mm-hmm. And we can pop those in the glasses. Like shake. And it's going to be a good, vigorous shake.
How many of each one?
2 of each. getting there. It's not quite painful to hold it. I'm gonna go until it's painful.
You can see these are ready.
Yeah, those look very pretty already. All right, I think we're good with this. So you can see it's nice and frosty. It should be almost painful to hold it in order to get to the right level of dilution. And then we're going to double strain to catch the pulp and also keep out any chips of ice so that we don't dilute it further than we would like. We're going to pour this through the strainer into our glasses.
Very nice.
Alrighty. That is good. Quite a bit of pulp. Excellent. All right. So, there, and then that is what it looks like with the 2 cubes. And then, of course, our final touch is our garnish. And here, as a nod to the orange of the triple sec, the garnish is an orange peel. So we're going to take our nice piece of orange peel, we're going to express it into the glass around, and then you can, with this glass, I've been finding I just fold it in half, give a little slice, and I pop it on the rim there.
I like it.
Yeah. So you get a nice, lovely little garnish there. Gives you the orange essence, orange oils spritzed across the top. We've got
And
the
it's
half
pretty.
rim, and it looks very pretty. And that will be the Extra Extraordinary Margarita.
Cheers.
How does it taste?
It's pretty good.
Yeah, so the nice thing is you get some of the sweetness, you get some bitterness from the Aperol, and the salt, obviously, and then you get a little bit of that earthy tequila flavor. So cheers to all of you. I hope you guys are enjoying your margaritas out there. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of the history and some of our techniques that we presented. Thanks so much for joining us.
There's some questions.
Yeah, are there any questions? Let's see. So, Aperol ice cubes, yes, 50-50. They freeze quite nicely because Aperol is only about 11 or 12% alcohol, less than wine. And so just mixing them with the water at 50-50, they freeze up. They don't hold together all that long, but better than, say, if you use Campari or something that's a little higher proof.
And they're a little crumbly, but they do a great job in staying together. And then when they start to break down in the glass, it gives the drink sort of ongoing flavor differences, which is nice. Good job.
That's tasty. Very good. Yeah, I've been experimenting with the formula a bit over the course of the week. I think one of the important things was definitely making sure that I shook it long enough to get the right level of dilution. I feel like some that were not quite dilute enough ended up tasting very tequila forward.
And this does not.
And also, I think I was using an older bottle of Aperol that I think had lost some of its sweetness. And so I actually, happened to run out of that and, started a new bottle of Aperol. I think I'll be keeping my Aperol in the fridge from now on because of that low proof. It probably needs to be kept in the fridge or in an airtight, because it doesn't have I could use one of my vacuum sealers or something like that. But I'll probably just keep it in the fridge for use there.
And that's something for us to be aware of, is if we've had something for a while, the output may not be exactly what we want it to be. So we should make sure we know how long we've had things.
Yep. just have to drink more of these. Get through our Aperol quickly. Any other questions?
These are delicious, and I'm not a big margarita fan in general, but I really like these. So.
All right, thanks for joining us here. We'll probably close down the Facebook Live, but we'd love it if you came and join us. How would you correct for the bitterness? Add more Cointreau? Yes, I think, or what I was experimenting with was adding just a touch of simple syrup, but really like a small amount, like a teaspoon, or like a teaspoon and a half. Or agave syrup. I was, but trying to add just a small amount, not too much, because, the Aperol actually has some sugar content as well. And so, I think the problem really was more about the dilution level and the older Aperol.
And maybe if you're using a lower grade tequila too, you might need to cut a little bit of that.
Possibly. I mean, again, a reposado is great for drinking, honestly, like neat. So might be a little overkill. I don't know, or the añejo might be a little bit of overkill for a mixed drink like this, where you've got quite a bit of other flavors going on. So even try it with a blanco. I didn't get an opportunity to try it with a blanco because I was really trying to get this kind of close to Fatima Leon's recipe. So cool. I'm glad you liked the addition of the Aperol.